my generation's like loaded with debt and like we can't get ahead. So we're going to throw shit at the wall. And that shit is going to be NFTs and it's going to be GameStop. Hello, everyone. GM. Welcome back to another episode of Overpriced JPEGs. I am so excited about our guest today. We are joined by the one and only Ben Mezrich. Y'all may be familiar with him, or you may be familiar with his work. He's the author of over 20 books, including Accidental Billionaires, which is the book that spawned The Social Network, the movie that you've almost certainly seen. He wrote Bitcoin Billionaires. Is that the right title? I'm reading it now. I should know. The story about the Winklevi twins. I think, did you also coin the term Winklevi twins? Or
it was me and Aaron Sorkin. I don't know which one of us gets the credit.
That's a power duo right there. You and Aaron Sorkin. Bringing Down the House, you wrote, which inspired the movie 21. Once Upon a Time in Russia. I actually think we're going to close this podcast off with some Russia questions. The Midnight Ride, The Anti-Social Network, which we'll talk about. That was your book about the GameStop story, which is being made into a movie with like some big name actors as we speak. And you've launched an NFT collection, which it sounds like will be a part of your journey for forevermore. But part of the pitch is I think your next nonfiction book is about the NFT movement. So we will, of course, talk about that. You are a hard person to intro because there's so much that could be said, but welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me on. And the NFT, it's going to be a movie. I'm writing a screenplay. So the NFT holders are sharing in a movie I'm writing. But everything else, it's a lot of stuff. So I'm happy to
everything you write seems to turn into a movie anyway. So, it's just how direct a route do you want to take to that versus...
That's the plan.
I also heard you say you write your books like screenplays in like 3 acts. So they lend themselves well to the screen, even when it's a novel.
Yeah. So all of my books are kind of a platform for a movie, even from the very beginning. So I write them with the intention of them becoming a movie.
Love it. Well, we're going to get into a lot of things you've written about, and of course, really a focus on NFTs and crypto. But before we get into all that good stuff, we do need to hear a word from our lovely, lovely sponsors.
When it comes to NFTs, convenience often wins over security, despite scams being everywhere. Brands and artists have no other choice by complying with big marketplace terms and weak security because no good alternative exists, which is what prompted Ledger to fix the problems of NFTs themselves and launch Ledger Market. The Ledger Market provides an end-to-end secure NFT experience for brands, artists, and users, enabling true ownership and control over NFT assets, from minting to storing. Ledger Market secures NFT projects via Ledger Enterprise, keeping you protected from phishing attacks and scams. And the market directs users to Ledger Live, where they can transact with a contract directly, giving clear signing details instead of blind signing and praying. Don't trust, verify with clear signing from Ledger Market. Stay up to date on the latest drops and marketplace updates by following Ledger on Twitter and joining the Ledger Open Discord, which is linked in the show notes below. BUENO is the NFT toolkit you need to launch your digital collectible on the blockchain without coding. Every step of the NFT creation process, from generation to mint, all taken care of by the BUENO NFT toolkit. With BUENO, you can load up your art layers, reorder the layers, tinker with rarity, everything you need to make your NFT project a reality. BUENO even allows you to mint your tokens on the blockchain with zero code and offers advanced minting logic like linking allow lists, airdropping tokens, and on-chain royalty configuration. As a part of their launchpad, you'll get access to forums to run surveys, email collection, and build your pre-sale list to make sure you are hooked into your own community. BUENO is full of powerful tools you need to build the most expressive NFT.
Okay, I want to start here, which is I heard you recently, I think on Real Vision with Raul, and you said, this was in August, so about a month ago, you said you felt like we were nearing the end of crypto winter. Do you still feel that way, and why?
Yeah, so I mean, I think, it's really hard to make predictions, obviously, with what's going on, but I really feel like, we hit that point of misery and we went as far as we're going to go in that direction. Now, I obviously, I don't have a crystal ball. I can't tell you where the prices are going to go up and down, but I feel like all the negativity is out there. And I can't see why there would be more than there is today. So I see it as an optimistic thing going forward. I think the economy as a whole is in a lull as we're coming out of a horrible pandemic, and we've got the war in Ukraine that came out of nowhere and sort of was just sort of a jackknife in terms of our recovery. But, how long it's going to take to really start flying, I couldn't tell you. But I do feel like, at least I personally believe, we're in kind of the end tail of the winter part of it, and going forward, it should be an upward move. But we'll see, right? We'll see. But I feel good about it. I feel optimistic. I feel like, all of the negativity is priced in now. So now going forward, it should be more and more positive.
There's also a distinction probably to be made between we've hit a bottom in sentiment and we've hit a bottom in pricing. Like,
Right.
I used to say that on the podcast a lot during the bull market, where I was like, we are early. That does not mean the prices are like too low. You know what I mean? Like, the fact that we are early in this technology's like adoption life cycle and everything else does not mean that you're like stupid PFP, no offense, right? Like, is someday going to be worth millions of dollars because more people are going to stream in. They might stream in and they probably are not going to buy that. So I think it's also to think from that perspective. I know you're friends with Adam Brotman, who I'm actually working to have come on the podcast, who really spearheaded and was behind the Starbucks Odyssey project. Is that part of your optimism that you're seeing, I don't know, people, friends of yours maybe who are bringing in corporations, like that there's just going to be a dearth of, or an abundance of adoption independent of pricing?
Yeah, Adam's a genius, by the way. But I really do think that you're seeing sort of every company try to figure out a way into this Web3 and into NFTs. So even though, the prices go up and down, there was a whole bunch of excitement when they were first launched. And then everyone's like, well, what is this really worth? What you're actually seeing behind the scenes is every single company figuring out, how do we get into this business? And you're seeing all these young people saying, how do I become the expert in this thing? So I do think, going forward, you're going to see thing after thing after thing launch until this is just normal, until that, every company has an NFT part of it, or a loyalty program that uses tokens and things like that. And sort of everyone is a part of this Web3 kind of revolution. So I don't see why you wouldn't have every Hollywood movie have an NFT linked to it, and why you wouldn't have sort of every kind of company like a Starbucks or a Reebok or a Nike also having a division on the metaverse. It's just a part of our future. So you're absolutely right. I mean, I can't tell you what your price of your picture is going to be, 2 years from now, but I do believe that every company is going to have a leg into this world.
It feels like a no-brainer if you work in a corporation and you no doubt have a digital division that you are, of course, exploring how you can enter the metaverse. When it comes to Hollywood, I feel like I get mixed signals. I've had a lot of people pitch episodes to me on the show. I've had people on the show who are making movies via NFTs or talking about how NFTs can kind of revolutionize the film industry. Then I also was in LA last week and met with one of my very good friends who works at Imagine Entertainment. And she was like, wait, what's Web3?
Right.
Literally knew nothing, which if she was in the marketing department of a corporate company would obviously not be the case. What is your honest assessment of the awareness level and the actual interest level in Hollywood for NFTs?
Yeah, so I think what you were saying before about us being really early is a part of this answer. We are so early that only the sharpest, kind of most forward-thinking people in Hollywood have already kind of looked at this and seen where it can go. But the giant conglomerates and the studios and stuff like that, they are very slow to embrace new technology, which is funny because what they do is so high tech in a lot of ways. But for them to move in this direction, they've got to see a lot of success already happening in this world. So I advise a lot of people in Hollywood involved in this, and our project is tangentially related to Hollywood. And the hardest thing in the world is to get someone to adopt something new. Because they're frankly all afraid for their jobs. It's very easy to say no, and it's very hard to say yes in Hollywood. Their whole job is to say no to things because you can't get fired for saying no. You only get fired if you say yes to something and then it loses money. So there are people looking, and there are a lot of companies saying, how do we get into this? But we're not ready yet. So I do think we're a little ways away from someone actually really taking a studio in this direction. But we're close, and you're going to see more and more of it. I mean, Quentin Tarantino tried to get into this here. You're seeing other people. But eventually, I believe you'll see every movie having sort of an NFT component to it, and lots of companies springing up to feed that giant Hollywood beast. And then in terms of people like me or people trying to make movies using the NFT world as sort of its community around it, I think you're going to have to see some successes before that becomes the model going forwards.
And we'll definitely talk about how you're doing and sort of get into the specifics of what you're doing. to maybe go head on at the meat of all this, like why will all Hollywood movies have an NFT associated with it? What will the incentive there be?
Well, I mean, the most important thing to a movie is its audience. And the whole idea behind a successful movie is word of mouth, is grassroots, is a community that derives something out of that movie. It sees themselves in it, identifies with it, and then goes to see it and buys tickets. And what you've got with the NFT platform is a way of, before you make the movie, discovering what your community is and having a community that's incentivized and supportive of it, that is pushing it forward even before you get started. And so, you've already got IP like Marvel, and Marvel is already this enormous thing, and it has this built-in giant audience for it. But it doesn't have a relationship with its audience the way sort of Web3 allows it to have. So eventually you're going to have ways that something like a big Marvel movie would be able to interact with its massive community rather than just sell something to it. So I think that that's going to be positive moving forward. But also for smaller people who are sort of starting and creating in the independent film route, for them, there's an incredible value in having a community, a supportive community even before you start filming, because that's what's going to end up feeding into the value of that object. So yeah, it all goes back to the idea that value is all in community now. And we've seen this in all these different industries. But the reality is that's where the real value is. 1 million people who like something is the value of that thing. And Hollywood knows this. And so if there's a way to reach out and have those 1 million people be involved before you shoot the movie, that's just a no-brainer for Hollywood.
So what's really interesting about that answer is that you're saying it'll be before the movie even gets made. Because I think there are some who are saying, we don't own movies anymore. People used to have their DVD collections and they'd put it on their wall or whatever. And it was a social signaling thing and almost like a collector's thing. And now we have streaming. And so there's no financial incentive. Like people don't buy DVDs anymore and own movies in that way. So NFTs will be a way for that to come back where you can almost own a movie again in a digital way. You seem to be putting the value on before the movie even gets made. Even if you are Warner and can make whatever movie you want and you don't actually need that community, right. It'll still happen because why not? Is that really what I'm hearing?
Yeah, because what you need, what Warner's needs is the audience. They need people who feel a part of it. Those are the biggest movies, is ones that have this sort of groundswell of people. I mean, you look at Avatar and the launch that's coming up for Avatar, and what they're feeding off of is the millions and millions of people who grew up with that early film and loved it and became a part of it and it was part of their personality. And that's the audience they're trying to feed to. But with NFTs, you could do that without having a previous movie. You can have a group of people who buy into the idea of it for whatever reason, and then they're the ones who are going to help it move forward.
In your books, something that I find really fascinating, or I can speak to like the Bitcoin Billionaires, which I'm reading now and really enjoying, you use a lot of direct quotes, which is so striking because you're recounting stories that maybe happened years ago.
Right.
How do you think about that stylistically? Is it like, hey, I want to create a great story. We can't know if this was precisely what was said, but we can feel comfortable it's in the realm? Or like, do you somehow know that this is what was being said?
Right. So the way I write my books is I spend a lot of time with the main characters. I spend as much time as I can talking to them, interviewing them, hanging out with them, kind of living vicariously through them and just, like following the Winklevi twins around New York for a year. And you're right. A lot of the stuff that I'm writing about took place years ago, under sort of sometimes circumstances that are cloudy. There are different points of view, different opinions.
Literally weed clouds,
exactly.
Right,
With Charlie
in the
Schramm,
air.
right. So I do recreate the dialogue. But what I often do is run that dialogue by the main characters. Either they read the book before I hand it in, or in talking to them, going through it with them. Is this feel like what was said during that point of view? So I'm trying to get as close as I can, but it's not always. Some of them are direct quotes, and some of them aren't. I use a style that's a little controversial in journalism. That certainly there are, old world journalists who don't like the way I write my books. And over the years, I've definitely, Janet Maslin of the New York Times has come after me enormously here and there for book after book. But what I'm doing is somewhat of a new journalism technique of recreating the scenes from the point of view of the characters themselves. So I spent a lot of time with them. In some of my books, I do have legal documentation. So I have direct quotes from legal, and if you look back at The Social Network, a lot of what went on between Zuckerberg and the Winklevi was directly from, depositions. So some of that is real. Some of it is told to you by the main characters or different characters, other than Zuckerberg, who didn't want to talk to me at all. But in general, I'm trying to recreate the scene as realistic and as real as it happened. And usually the main characters agree that that's essentially what was said. But yeah, I'm doing something a little bit Hollywood with it. And I think it's more fun and more interesting to read it in quotes than it is necessarily to say, they might have said this or they might have said that.
Right. Yeah.
So yes, I do think you have to take my books as they're written and decide whether that's something you want to get into or not. And I'm pretty open about my style in terms of how I write these books. I mean, they're true stories, and everything that happened in that scene happened in that scene. But I'm recreating the dialogue based on the people I interviewed and based on the setting. And then we go from there.
I heard you say that you like to create almost mythology, not in the sense that it's false, but create these origin stories that do end up creating sort of an ethos or mythology around a company. Certainly The Social Network did that. It was like it has completely shaped how people view Facebook. Yeah. And, is that part of it? Like, you need that more immersive feeling like you're there hearing the dialogue in order to create that sense of an origin and mythology?
Yeah. I mean, I want to document important points in history, origin stories, like the moment where life changed for all of us, and will hopefully 10 years from now, it'll still resonate. And I think The Social Network definitely captured that. But certainly all my books try and do that. Every book I write, I'm trying to write about something that I think will be world changing. And so I want to write it in a way that it can be read by people 10 years from now, and not just people who are living it. And in some ways, sometimes I'm successful at this, sometimes I'm not. I think the GameStop story, which we're shooting right now, is another one of those sort of origin moments. It's not just this funny thing that happened with GameStop, but it's a change in how we view value and how we're going to approach Wall Street. And it's going to be a change that's going to resonate for decades to come. And I think you can pick most of my books and find something like that in them. I mean, some of them are just a good story, but for the most part, I'm really trying to pick moments in history. And so, yeah, I think our mythology is created through movies and through stories like this. And when you look at, what's happened in the last 25 years, I'm hoping you can point to a movie or a book that sort of tells that story in a dramatic way.
That, captures that.
In an hour. And so there's a trick to it. I mean, it's a bit of a game to sort of dramatize it to the point where when you read it, you realize this isn't just this moment between this weird guy in a hoodie and a couple of giant twins. This is something that's going to be important to us going forwards. And so, yeah, that's part of the art of it, I think. Yeah.
So you think meme stock culture, or I shouldn't say culture, is meme stock trading here to stay?
Oh, yeah. And not only that, I mean, I think it's a sea change in how we look at Wall Street and how we look at value and how we value things. It was a moment when we saw that the emotion behind a stock is what drove this stock. It wasn't because GameStop is such a great company, right? It wasn't because they were, those ridiculous stores in every mall should exist 10 years from now. They probably shouldn't. But it was because we all, or millions of people, loved GameStop, and they liked the idea of this place that they had gone when they were a kid, or they still go today and buy their games. And even though everything's turning digital, they don't want to see GameStop go under, and they hate Wall Street. And it was that emotional part of it that made that stock suddenly as valuable as GE. And I don't see why that won't happen again and again and again. Because of social media, millions of people can come together and coalesce on one point of view. And one emotion is more powerful than all the fundamentals you want to throw. And so Wall Street is stuck in this world of, okay, what is the value of this company? What are their earnings? What are their profits? That's not important. And we've seen this with crypto. It's not important, what Bitcoin is actually used for. What's important is that there are millions of people who see it as this liberating, anti-bank, world borderless international thing. It's the sentiment of it that matters more than what it's actually used for. And so it's not important that it's not used for money the way we thought maybe Bitcoin would be. What's important is that it's considered now this important libertarian store of value that people all over the world want to buy into. And that's where its value is derived. And so I think when you look at the stock market, you're going to see this happen again and again. Bed Bath & Beyond, it's a crappy store. But that doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter, because if 1 million people decide we like Bed Bath & Beyond, the stock is going to be worth a lot. And just as easily, it can go back down. And so I don't see how this isn't going to happen over and over again. And essentially, Wall Street has to realize that value is no longer determined by the things they thought it was determined. It's determined by the sentiment of the people.
So I want to push deeper on that, because I think that's fascinating. And even as like a young person who loved these movements and was like rooted to Wall Street bets when the GameStop thing was going down, there's also this old school, like old soul in me who was like a deep student of Warren Buffett. And I'm like, but how? But before I kind of fully pivot us there, you know, the GameStop situation felt like this perfect collision, because you did actually have a certain amount of fundamental analysis that went on there that said, hey, this stock is shorted 100, like over 100% of its float. Like more stocks of this have been shorted than there are actual shares outstanding. And that was part of what made it work, was that there was a fundamental analysis there that went on that created this short squeeze that allowed it to rise. So are the right moments when you have that combination of almost like lore mythology around a stock, the nostalgia play, the narrative play, and a smattering of fundamentals?
Well, I mean, I certainly think that had it not been shorted to that degree, it would not have shot up as quickly as it did. And the whole battle with Melvin Capital, you know, it doesn't just add drama to the movie, but there was really some technical things going on there that allowed it to go up so fast. But I also think that the more important side of it was the buy side, was that there were so many people who decided to buy that stock. And the vast majority of them were not doing technical analysis, right? The vast majority of them were watching funny memes on Reddit and thought, this is great. You know, let's screw Wall Street. And so you could look at like Dogecoin as another example where there was no fundamentals. There was no short. None of that had anything to do with the rise of Doge. It was just Elon Musk screaming about it and all these people saying we love it. So I do think that, yes, the short side of it added to it. And, you know, Roaring Kitty's analysis of why they could become the Amazon of gaming.
Because of
all
Ryan
of that
Cohen.
fed into it, and Ryan Cohen. But the reality was 9 million people on Reddit can move a stock. And it doesn't matter. None of that other stuff matters compared to that. So if 9 million people tomorrow decide that any other stock should be worth $100 a share, it will be. And it can't sustain unless people don't sell. But I think that rise can come without the short. And so, you know, who knows? But I mean, I do think that the fundamentals are less meaningful than the gathering together and the battle cries and all of that stuff.
Is there something either self-fulfilling or cyclical here in this sense, which is, I think, at the root of some of this is, call it my generation's feeling that like we've been screwed, and you've had sort of, you know, boomers accrue a tremendous amount of wealth. I think there was a stat recently, like $76 trillion is held in the hands of like 76 million, primarily American boomers, you know, and sort of this feeling that these bailouts, what they fundamentally do is don't let incumbent companies fail, which is fun, which helps new companies rise up. And so that's helped to preserve wealth sort of among this particular class. And my generation's like loaded with debt and like, we can't get ahead. So we're going to throw shit at the wall. And that shit is going to be NFTs, and it's going to be GameStop, and it's going to be, and that is, I guess I want you to react to this and tell me if you think this cyclical thing I'm about to describe is true. So that's like what's fueling some of this, but it's a really risky way to go about trying to make money, right? And probably more often than not is most people are going to lose money on this strategy, which probably just keeps the cycle alive because those people are still not getting ahead. And so still desperate. It's like a person banking on the lottery. And so just keeps making those bets. And is that part of why this is going to last for the next 2 decades in your view? I
mean, that's part of it. I think another part of it is your generation, and I've interviewed a lot of people in terms of writing this GameStop book. You don't want 2X. You don't even want 10X. You want 100X, okay?
I want to
Most
retire.
of the people I talk to, they're not going to sell their stock when it doubles because that's bullshit, right? That's not going to change your life. That's not going to get you out of the crappy apartment you might be in. That's not going to cover your debt. You need 10X or 100X. And so that is a huge change, generational change going on, because the generation of my generation or above my generation, if you doubled your money, you were done. Or even if you made 10% on your money, you consider that a huge success. I don't know anyone under the age of 30 who thinks 10% of their money is good success. They think that's crap, right? And that powers crypto, that powers meme stocks, that powers innovation in a way, because people want to throw money at something and make 100 times their money. But at the same time, it's incredibly dangerous and it's not rational. And so the problem is you're right, you're going to keep having the majority of people lose making these bets, because the stock market has become a lottery. Things like GameStop have been you buy a ticket and hope that ticket's going to change your life. And that's not what investing's supposed to be. Investing is supposed to be small gains, and you're supposed to, over time, because of the fundamentals, earn a percentage. And that's not what anyone young wants to do. And so that is going to be problematic, I think. It's going to create these large, dips and undulations in the stock market. It's going to change how you have to make your investments if you're a rational investor. But that's the current, listen, your generation and my generation to some degree, there's a lot of anger. There's a lot of anger aimed towards Wall Street, which, has been screwing people for a long, long time. And it goes all the way back to 2008 and all of that crap. There's anger politically, obviously, because the direction things move isn't necessarily the direction we want them to move all the time. And then there's the pandemic, which just feeds it all, because everyone got screwed out of 3 years of your life. And for young people, it was a really important 3 years. For older people, it was like, whatever, but for young people, they lost 3 incredibly important years to them. And so I do think you're going to see a lot of that feed into markets and into things like crypto. Yes, I do think you're right. I think it is going to be something that happens again and again and again. And I'm not sure what the answer to it is. There has to be some level of rationality. At some point, people have to realize that, you should sell your stock when it doubles. but in general, I think that's where we stand right now. Yeah.
Well, and it's this movement towards brand, like all of this is like the sentiment of the nostalgia of GameStop. And we're seeing that shift, I think, when it comes to influencers having more power than like traditional brands. Mr. Beast's chocolate company or chocolate bar company becoming like the number one chocolate bar, where there's this trust towards almost like brand feelings and people over kind of corporations and institutions. And again, I can push back against it. I love Warren Buffett. I think he's brilliant, but I think he stands in a very, very small group of people who seem to actually just diligently sit down and read for 10 hours a day and find insights and do math in his head that allows him to consistently pick companies that based on fundamentals can go up. And I don't think most of Wall Street even does that. I don't think even most institutional investors, like they have kind of rigged the game for themselves, and then they call it like intelligence, or they call it like rules, and really it's them playing a fairly rigged game because of the volumes they're playing at, because of the way Robinhood operates, or like the high frequency trading stuff that Michael Lewis. So I feel like it's you and Michael Lewis covering these stories like in this way. They're so awesome, He's covered it. And,
I do the books that Michael doesn't do. When he turns something down. No, I love Michael. I think he's a phenomenal writer. My brother, every time I hand in a book, my brother will say, it's good, but it's no Michael Lewis. So he's a genius. I think you're right. I do think you're right. I think there is a rigged game going on in Wall Street, and people who sort of work in it always have the advantage. The GameStop story was one moment when, for a short period of time, the retail trader did have the advantage. And you'll see that again and again. But in the long term, I think the people who kind of run the machines are the ones who make the most money off of it. And so it's like the house in Vegas. You're going to have the people who are sitting in the house always in the end doing better than the people who are stepping in and playing for an afternoon.
Yeah. There's a great line in your Bitcoin Billionaires book about the Winklevoss twins, where in like the very beginning of their journey, they're being pitched to like invest in Bitcoin. And he's like, they're like, so what, or, pitched kind of on Bitcoin. And they're like, so what do we do? Do we buy Bitcoin? And they're like, you could, or you could be the house, right. Bitcoin is like the gambling currency or whatever, just tearing them up, I'm sure, for starting Gemini and be the house yourself and be the exchange. Okay. The NFT world, which obviously is deeply connected to everything we're talking about. You're writing a screenplay that'll be your next nonfiction project. Right. What do you know what the story is going to look like? Everything you've documented have these strong characters, the Winklevoss twins, Melvin Capital, Zuckerberg, whatever. Who are the characters, if you know yet, for this origin story about the NFT movement?
Yeah, so the NFT movie that I'm trying to write, it has basically three main characters. And you have one main character, which is a young person who kind of stumbles into the world of NFTs. They're all their family and friends think they're crazy. Everyone around them is saying, this is garbage, it's not real. And this character slowly makes success, has some pitfalls along the way. And that's kind of your main character in one respect. The other character is a young artist or photographer who wouldn't necessarily be able to break into their world. And through NFTs finds a way to find an audience and breaks in. And then the third character is a scammer and someone who is just a bad actor who's out to fuck over people who are in the NFT world. And I think through these three stories which intersect, you're going to sort of get the broader story of this movement, of how it started, of where it began. And within the movie, you're going to get the things like the Bored Apes, and you're going to get people. So you get all kind of the big hits as part of the story. But those are the three characters you're going to follow. I don't have the specific characters, yet. It's going to be all based in reality. Yeah. But it's not going to be as close a biography as, say, the Facebook story was. It's going to be a little bit more fictional. But I've been turned on to a lot of stories of each of those three. And I've been interviewing people who potentially feed into those three characters. And so, part of our NFT project has been holding these Twitter spaces where I interview characters who are potentially going to feed into the movie.
So let's talk about the NFT project. Maybe just explain it to folks. I know you've done like 3 drops effectively to bring your community.
It's pretty simple. So we did 3 drops, and each one is kind of, it's based on sort of the research I do for one of my stories. So the first drop had to do with meme stocks, and it was all these little rockets, and it was 6,000 pieces at 0.06 ETH. And basically, you have to own one of each of the 3 drops. The second drop was a Bitcoin Billy drop, which are little PFPs that look like, Bitcoins that are doing all these different things. And then the third drop was Vegas related. You own one of each of the 3 drops, and then you're going to get a share in the screenplay I'm writing about the NFT space. So basically, I'm partnering with my NFT community to create this work of art, which will hopefully become a big movie, which will hopefully do really well, and all of this kind of thing. And so also on the Discord that we've been running, we've been doing things like we had a blackjack competition where people basically used their NFT to play blackjack. It had in the metadata a little blackjack hand, and you got to play that hand against a house, and it was really cool. And we're going to have a big Vegas meetup, and someone won a poker game with me at the Vegas meetup. We do things like we watched The Social Network in the Discord, and I kind of live commented during it. And so it's kind of a community around the stuff that I write. And then the people involved get to be a part of this movie that I'm writing. And as I write the movie going forward, I'm actually going to be, we're going to do a read through of different acts of the screenplay online. We're going to do sort of live Discord to talk about the characters. There's going to be potential of naming some characters after people who own into it. So it's going to be a real interactive effort as I put together this movie. And then the goal is for really it to end up either on streaming or theaters. And that's something that the community as a whole is going to decide also once I finish this draft. So I have 6 months to write the draft now.
When does the clock start?
The clock officially started at the end, at the third drop. So the third drop was last month. So I'm 1 month into the 6-month process. Okay. It'll be sooner than that. I'm pretty fast in terms of
you're prolific. It's crazy. Do you write these things in like a month?
I do. So I have written a book in 4 weeks. I've written a book in 10 weeks. It depends on the project. Bringing Down the House, which was my biggest book, I wrote in 4 weeks. And I wrote it in Vegas, staying in a different hotel room every night to get the feel of the MIT Blackjack team. It was nuts. I wrote The Social Network in about 8 weeks, the book. And then Sorkin wrote the screenplay in 1 month after that, which was kind of amazing. And we were in a room together. We were in a hotel in Boston, and I was handing him the chapters. It was completely nuts. So these things do happen very fast. I get into this frantic writing mode, and it just goes fast. So this, a screenplay is a little different. I've written a couple screenplays, but I enjoy it. It's a lot of fun. And so the plan is, within 6 months, I have this screenplay, and then we have a couple choices. We can actually sell it to a studio, and then what money comes in is divided among the holders. Or we could independently make it ourselves and try and have that movie become, a big movie. And that's a way to make more money on a movie, but it's also much higher risk. So it's something the community would have to decide.
Okay, this ownership piece of like, you'll share the profits of the screenplay with your token holders. Yeah. I feel like I've talked to people about this over and over and over again, because does that become a security? Are you concerned about being accused of being like a security broker and being unregistered if you're offering that back to your community? And how do you think about that?
Yeah. So, before we launched the project, we spent 6 months with lawyers, and we created this whole opt-in scenario when people bought into the project, which basically laid it out as a work of art that the community is taking part in. And so we don't really see it in that way. Obviously, there's not a lot of clear regulation about what's going on in this space and what these things are. If there are clearer regulation comes forward, then we'll have to adjust to whatever people say. But at the moment, we feel very secure in what we're doing. That you're basically getting a token that allows you to take part in this screenplay, and then the screenplay goes forward and does well, and the community owns the screenplay. And so it doesn't seem like a problem to us, and or the lawyers that were involved in drafting it. So I guess we'll see if things change going forward in the NFT space. But at the moment, it seems pretty fine.
I was involved in a project that's great, that's moving forward, called New Here. It's a documentary by a Sundance Award-winning documentary filmmaker capturing really the crypto art movement, specifically Dan Sickles. And we were trying to figure out a way to finance the whole film via these NFT holders and make them real like producers and film financiers, and give them the same effectively terms that a traditional Hollywood producer would get. And we ended up down the path of like trying to issue a security through Republic, and it was kind of a nightmare scenario. And I talk to people like you, and I'm like, maybe we really did just severely overcomplicate the whole thing. Like the likelihood the SEC is going to crack down here it seems unlikely, but at scale, the question is like, if everybody starts doing this
going forwards, I think there will have to be clear regulation. And I think that projects like mine will push that needle forward. And hopefully Hollywood will see what I'm doing and say, this is a great way to do this, get into the game. And then the SEC will have to say, okay, well, now that this is happening in this space, we need to make some clear regulations of what is considered a security and what it's not. But at the moment, it seems like, we're creating sort of an industry here, and we're hoping going forward that this becomes the way movies get made. And I think some people have to come forward and do it, and then see where it goes. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to break ground here. We're trying to do something pretty new. And there's other people doing things that are similar, like Jenkins and a couple other projects that are trying to do things in this space. And I think we're all hopefully going to move the space forward in a really cool way. Yeah. But we'll see. We'll see. At some point, you're right. If big companies move into this space and this is how movies get made, there will have to be clear, legislation around it. But there's just not right now. And
with that said, the idea that they're going to come in and say, no, you can't do this, you can't effectively crowdfund this movie and offer them some sort of return is sort of offensive. I mean, this gets into the broader securities conversation of just like, I get it, you want to protect retail investors, I guess, from a bad actor, a scammer, convincing them they're going to make a movie when they're not. But like, you can go to Vegas and blow all the money you want on lottery tickets or whatever else. I
agree. I think the important component here is that people are open, that people tell you what it is you're getting into from the beginning, that there's sort of some sort of opt-in to the project. And it's very clearly lined out from the very beginning, not a rug pull. I mean, part of what I'm writing in the movie is that there's so many scammers and so much rug pulling going on in the industry. That's a big part of the story. And that's something that needs to be cleaned up before this becomes mainstream. So I do think that there are places for regulation. There's an important, role for government in any kind of economy. But in general, I do think the feeling in Web3 is that this is something people should be allowed to do. It's people coming in with eyes open, doing something cool. And I think that's the way we look at it.
What is the advantage in your mind and for somebody like you to getting a movie made this way as opposed to the traditional route, which you could certainly do as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think the advantage of NFTs to an author is this idea of having a group of people who are behind your work, incentivized forwards, to push your work, who you can communicate with. Normally, like Twitter is a megaphone. I put up a quote, I don't know who's looking at it. I might respond here and there, but really it's just screaming into the void. When you do a book signing, it's, 50 people in a room. There's no real interaction between you and your community. And I don't think your community you have a fan base, but you don't feel like you're a part of it and they're a part of your world. What I love about the NFT space is that the people who buy into my NFT project are people that, are part of my writing going forwards. I hope that this becomes a component of my career, with every project going forward. Every project has some sort of NFT component to it, so that I'm relating with my community and they're behind the book. They own a piece of the book. That would be a really cool way to write books going forwards. So yeah, I think there's something really neat about that. And I think it's not possible without NFTs. You can have something like a Substack where people just, pay a subscription fee to be a part of it. But that's not the same, I don't think, as owning a piece of it, or being a part of it in an artistic way, which I think is really neat.
Is it at all financially advantageous? And I know that's not why you would be doing it, but as I think about how do we convince more people to do it, is there a financial advantage to an artist in some capacity, or author, screenwriter, to go about it this way?
Well, I definitely think for a new author breaking forward, this would be an important way to do it, because it's extremely hard to break into this industry now. It's very hard to be an author for a living. For a struggling author or starting author, you can't just write a book and live off of that. If you could launch an NFT that supported your book, you could potentially live off of your books, which would be really, really cool. For someone like me, not really. I mean, if I wrote a movie and sold it to Hollywood, I'd probably make more that way than doing it in this way. But I do think that there are aspects to this that are incredibly rewarding that don't exist out there, which is having a community that's excited. For Midnight Ride, a book I just put out last year, we did a puzzle where we just had a free NFT drop that had in it a puzzle that changed every day. And it went back to pages in the book. So we had, thousands of people just trying to solve puzzles that had them reading the book. That was really, really cool. I don't know that it enhanced sales in any, way that I could see. But what it did, it had all these people who were online every night talking about the book, having a good time that I got to interact with. It was enjoyable. It was fun. And so it makes the book a little bit more interactive. Financially, I think, listen, it could be a model that works very well. You could, part of that would have to be the economy coming back and the whole NFT world going back to where it was. But you could have an author like Stephen King launching an NFT around a book that could be quite profitable for him and make it worthwhile. So I do think going forwards, every author will want to have some level of this to it. But yeah, I mean, there's different ways you can sell a book. You can go the traditional route and try and sell it to a publisher. You can publish it on Amazon. I want a third route to be launching an NFT around a book and then, having the book come out to that community. Yeah. I think that we're a competitor eventually to Amazon Kindle. This could be a platform that breaks new authors, and that's something we're hoping to do going forwards, with an NFT component supporting which books the community wants to see written. And eventually you'll have people launch an NFT, then write a book, and the book will go to that community. And that will be a better way, I think, than what Amazon Kindle does, which is you just throw a book out there and God knows if anybody ever sees it.
Yeah, I think I can get into this very black and white headspace. And I actually think it's reflective of the broader market where people are like, the broader mainstream who are maybe skeptical of this, or like, it's all or nothing. Like NFTs are going to take over the world, and right. Be literally everything, or they're a complete scam and a complete, whatever. And then the reality is we'll probably always have a couple of different models, and it's great to have a number of different models. So I can say personally, and I know there's lots of introverts in this space. You're probably an introvert, you're a writer, whatever, who love doing this. But like, to me, the idea of being beholden, I already feel beholden enough to my listeners, like adding this NFT component, adding like they've financed me component, like the anxiety and exhaustion I feel thinking about, like, I don't know, feeling any more beholden is actually for me like overwhelming. And there's something almost nicer about like, hey, I'm going to pitch this to like one like rich person who's going to just like fund it. And I'm like beholden to that one dude that I can like pick up the phone and have a call with in an hour, whatever, yeah. Like, or woman, I'm not trying, like feels almost more manageable to me.
I get what you're saying. And listen, I don't think that every author is going to take to this. I think there's going to be certain authors that love being out there with their audience and they love having a community. I mean, I went to NFT NYC and we threw a cocktail party for, the BENFT holders. And there was, 150 people in that room and I loved it. We all hung out. I was telling stories. They were telling me their stories. I love that stuff. Not every author does love that stuff. And I totally understand that. It's weird. I'm not actually I'm introverted in terms of my writing life, but I'm actually out there a lot on the road and out there with my characters and out there with people. And I love that aspect of it, but not every author does. I don't know that, like, you know, the Catcher in the Rye guy,
J.D. Salinger
would have ever taken to this component of writing. But there are writers out there who do want, you know, to be a part of their audience and that kind of thing. So I get what you're saying. The reality is, it's not that you know, when you do something like this and you have a group of people, I feel beholden to my fans, whether or not they're buying into my project or not.
Yes.
When and I'm sure you're the same way, but when I write a book, I'm imagining all these people reading it, and I want them to like it, and I want them to, you know, be able to do that 2-hour flight and have their head in a book the whole time. So, you know, I'm already in that feeling of that. And to me, it's not pressure so much. If that's the fun of it, that's what makes it exciting and fun. So yeah, I like the idea that there's people already involved in a project that I'm writing. To me, that makes it more exciting to write than writing something on spec and then going to try to sell it to somebody. So yeah.
I also wonder if it has to do with the stage in career. Like I still feel so new in my like kind of creative process that you have like opening it up again, like, and I do feel really beholden to everyone who listens to the show, which is why adding even more like pressure around that stresses me out, where I could see myself hitting a later point in my career where I feel just really confident in, you know, my art, so to speak. And like, you know, my plan is to retire and be a writer because I really fundamentally think what I want to do is be a writer, but I haven't gotten there yet. I think it could be different, you know, like you're a master of your craft and I could see it being really fun.
Yeah. I've definitely been around a long time. I mean, I've written 25 books at this point, which is
it's incredible.
It sounds like a lot. People only really read 2 of them, let's be honest. But I have written
you have so many that are fascinating topics,
I have
though.
A lot
you know,
of books.
like
they weren't all home runs. You know, it's every time you have one come out, you think this is going to be a home run, and it's always frustrating when it's not. And some of my stories, I think, you know, still are going to be made into movies in the future, which is really, really cool. But yes, I do think part of it is being at a phase in my career where I'm like, let's see what else I can do. What other cool things are going on? And the NFT space just, you know, the Winklevi were the ones that told me about it. They were talking to me when I was following them around researching Bitcoin, and they were really up on the idea that this could be the future, that the whole idea of you owning something that's online, but you can sell it, it's unique, it's tradable. It really spoke to me as an author, the idea that art can live virtually and that a community can sort of be a part of your art. It just was really, really cool. But I do agree, it's not for everybody. But I do think there's a lot of authors who will get into this space.
I want to ask some questions from the audience, so to speak, people who wrote in on Twitter, and then a couple specific questions about some of your books. We'll end with like a Russia question I have. The main question that seemed to come up in various forms were, what are the similarities or differences you see in the Web3 movement and the movements you've covered in the past, like the social media movement, with the sub question within that tending to be like, do you see differences in the founders and the kind of almost the archetypes of the characters that are showing up, or does it feel very similar?
Yeah. So one of the things that I feel is very similar is I've always kind of been intrigued by the idea that you might walk by this door 100 times and never look inside. And then one day you open the door and in there's something really cool and wild going on that only a few people know about, but they're super enthusiastic about it. And that is how I felt about social media back then. And that is how I feel about what's going on in Web3, is that there's this 100,000 people who are living this, who are obsessed with it, who are just 24 hours a day thinking NFTs and the whole kind of Web3 movement and where is this going to go? And then the mainstream has no idea that's even going on. They don't even know what it is. And so there's that part of it that I find very exciting. The founders there are some similarities, but I don't feel the same way that I feel like a lot of the social media founders were all out to try and become billionaires. Everyone I interviewed, they had an end game. And it was to create this massive thing of users and then make $1 billion. And I don't feel that's what's happening in Web3. I think that a lot of the people, I mean, there is a speculative nature of it, people who buy and sell NFTs, but more it's about the ride and the excitement of it. And there's this whole kind of philosophy behind it, which seems much stronger than what I saw when I wrote about social media. I mean, Zuckerberg had a philosophy, but a lot of the other people really were just trying to make a lot of money. And I think that's different now, although there are people like that. And I do think there's way more scamming and rug pulling going on in this than ever before. That might be because of the technology. There's a lot of reasons why that might be, but
anonymity.
Anonymity is a big part of it. It's much more the Wild West than even crypto was, and crypto was the Wild West. But in general, almost everybody is a cowboy in this realm. Everybody's running around gunslinging and coming up with an idea and going for it, and so a lot of people get fucked over, as opposed to in crypto, where you definitely had these big fuck over moments, but not to the scale you're seeing in the NFT realm. So yeah, I think there are similarities. I do think it's an origin of something enormous and life-changing, but I do think we're going to go through a lot of growing pains to get there.
It feels like, in the position I'm in as a pseudo journalist, I think you could say, I look up to women like Kara Swisher, who were like the early journalists of the tech era. And it feels, and I want to know if I'm right or wrong, like it feels like there's way more happening here. Like I can't possibly know or cover all of the companies, the projects, everything that's springing up in this, where I feel like it was more of a contained group in the early days.
Kara
like you could kind of, it was like, who were the founders you should be?
Follow Zuckerberg around for 3 years and she built a career. Now, Kara's great. I've done her show. She's amazing. But I do agree. You're absolutely right. Good. There are so many. It's crazy. I mean, it's a massive, like even trying to write this screenplay, every day someone says, you should write about this. There's a dozen new stories. How do you find that through line? With social media, it was easy to find that through line. With Bitcoin, I chose the Winklevi because you can't miss those guys, right? I mean, 65 identical twin Olympic rowers. They are the through line. With NFT space, I'm still trying to get my head around what is through line. What is that simple story in the middle of it that everything else kind of swings around like a snake wrapping around it? And so you're absolutely right. This space, but because that's what Web3 is, there's a million little heads to this hydra, and you have to figure out what is the body of it. But it is moving in a direction. I do feel like it's moving in a direction. It's just a question of how do you find that through line. So you're right. You're absolutely right. It's much more, it's like Discord. Discord is garbage. You go on Discord and it's like, what the hell is going on here? But that's the space we're in. It's the Wild West. It really is.
COINSHIFT is a leading treasury management and infrastructure platform for DAOs and crypto businesses that need to manage their treasury operations. Every crypto org needs to manage its treasury, and COINSHIFT offers a simple, flexible, and efficient multi-chain treasury management platform built on top of the highly secure Gnosis Safe. With COINSHIFT, your organization can go from primitive single-chain treasury management to expressive, flexible, and multi-chain treasury features, such as global user management, global contacts, proposal management, and many other features that can be shared across an entire organization, allowing users to save time and reduce operational burdens and gas costs. COINSHIFT even has data tools like account reporting across the 7 chains on which it operates. Used by industry powerhouses such as Uniswap Grants, Balancer, Consensus, and Messari, COINSHIFT is speeding up the coordination and efficiency of the organizations that use it. You have to keep up with the frontier, and COINSHIFT makes that easy. So sign up at coinshift.xyz/bankless. Do you buy NFTs? Do you like playing in the profile picture games or searching for underpriced rares? Or you're part of an NFT community and you want that sweet social experience that your NFT brings you? Of course you want these things. It's why you're listening to this podcast, and it's also why you should check out SINTRA. SINTRA is the most powerful and friendly all-in-one time saver for NFT investors. A new social-fi investment app with real-time sales, floor price tracking, Twitter mentions, and 700,000 wallets, all available to check out. All infused into a social experience to connect you with other like-minded NFT investors. In SINTRA, you can do your social media things like post, reply, share, ask questions, react, right next to where you showcase your beloved and cherished NFTs. And you also get a customizable feed of NFT activity, keeping you up to speed with the always changing meta of the NFT world. If you're not using SINTRA, you're falling behind. So go to sintra.com/bankless and connect your wallet to enter the world of SINTRA.
Another question that came from folks, would you or how would you rebrand or market NFTs? Would you call them NFTs? Would you call them something else?
Yeah, and that's something that I've talked to Adam about, Adam Brotman and Starbucks, what they're trying to do.
I recently talked to somebody at UTA being like, we should call them digistamps. And I that was modeled off of the stamp thing that Odyssey did.
That it's a really tricky moment in the NFT space because there is a lot of bad feelings towards it. There's a lot of people who are negative about it. Until the prices start skyrocketing again, you're going to find people hesitant to get into the space, big corporations, and sell something called an NFT. So you might need some level of rebrand, whether it's as a loyalty program, as a token. it's a great question. Maybe you won't need to, but I do think that what is existing today that are NFTs will exist 10 years from now. We may not call them NFTs. I do think that's definitely part of it. Sure.
Some specific questions about some of your books or people you've covered in your books.
Sure.
What do you think of Mark Zuckerberg today?
Mark is listen, I have gone through a lot of sort of, different feelings about Mark Zuckerberg. He was not thrilled when I wrote the book, Accidental Billionaires. He first said he would talk to me, then he wouldn't talk to me. I was able to send questions to him, which he then refused to answer. There was this whole 6-month process of going back and forth. He didn't want any other story than his own story told. He didn't want there to be Winklevi. He didn't want there to be Eduardo. It was just Mark. Now, Mark has these visions, these megalomaniacal visions of what the world should look like. And we don't all agree with those visions. And originally, he was trying to do a good thing with Facebook, which was to create this worldwide village that we would all live in that would make the world better because you and your neighbors and everybody would be connected online the same way villages used to be, back in the Middle Ages, I guess. And then it didn't go that route, right? It became this giant monolith, this giant sort of siloed thing where they took your data and sold it, and there was fake news propagating all over the place. And rather than bringing us together, it threw us all apart, and everybody was fighting with each other. So my feelings about Mark is that he's an absolute genius who had a vision that was actually good, and then it went in a different direction. And now he's a guy who always believes he's right, and that everyone will always come around to him. So he makes a decision. Everybody complains about it. He doesn't change course. And eventually people come around to it. That's the way he looks at the world. And so it's very tricky to see Facebook ever going in any direction other than where Mark wants it to go, as long as Mark is there. So, where is it going to go from here? I don't know the answer to that. My feelings are that Mark's a brilliant guy who doesn't quite get why people don't like him. This is a guy who really, I think at one point thought he could be president. I think Sheryl Sandberg feels the same way. They're both people who think that everyone should like them and that they're doing good. And not everyone agrees with that. Yeah. And so it's very tricky for them to understand.
How do you, I'll preface this question. We talked about Kara Swisher. Kara, I think, has been like kind of the thought leader in the I would maybe say like a little bit of an anti-Mark, though she says she likes him and has a soft spot for him because they're from the same town in upstate New York or whatever. Right. But like kind of anti-Mark and Sheryl. And I've always maybe been a little bit defensive of them, feeling like who in the world could possibly handle the responsibility of Facebook? Like I've sort of felt like, nobody is up to that task. Right. Reading some of your books and seeing some of the things Mark wrote about, and obviously I knew about Face Smash and things, but like some of the things, or whatever the rating women thing was at Harvard that he did.
Yeah, Face Smash, right.
But yeah, it was Face Smash. Like, but then also reading some of like the emails that got uncovered of his or DMs he'd written to people at Harvard that are,
in Bitcoin Billionaires, there's some really awful stuff.
Icky, like stuff that, and there's an element of, okay, he was 18. And there's also an element of like, I wasn't like that at 18. You know what I mean? Right. Like I have always had a certain moral character that meant I was never going to ever do anything like that. I'm also never going to create Facebook, but like, how much does somebody really change if they're kind of really willing to like sacrifice anyone for their own self-gain, even before the vision is like maybe pure and good? How do you have thoughts on that, or how you think about him as like a moral person?
Yeah. I mean, if you read Bitcoin Billionaires, you can see that at least at 18, he was very immoral, right?
Yeah.
And I think if we had those quotes in The Social Network, I don't know that he would have survived it, honestly, because a lot of it was pretty negative about how he feels about people who use Facebook, about how he felt about the Winklevi twins. About
let's say specifically he was willing to take data to use people who had signed up for Facebook and like hack their emails. I mean, like stuff that if you think like it is literally chilling when you think of it as like the leader of social media today and privacy
Absolutely.
concerns.
I mean, he doesn't have the same sort of moral values that you would want in someone who has control of a billion people's data, right? So yeah, I do think that having read those emails, I do think about him differently than I did, say, when I wrote Accidental Billionaires and didn't have access to those emails at that time. So yeah, I mean, I do think that he's a different person today, obviously, than he was when he was 18. He's been running this major company for a long time. And you're right, it's a massive mantle on a guy. But at the same time, I don't think he's set up the same way we all are. And I do think he can be very Machiavellian and robotic and antisocial. And so for him, it seems normal to do these things that we would find morally reprehensible. So I do think there's an element to that. At the same time, to run a major company, you probably have to be somewhat hard and dangerous. So it's a mix of things. Like I don't judge people. I don't judge Mark. I don't sit in judgment on anybody. Listen, he's built something immense. He's one of the great sort of builders of our time, who built something that changed all of our lives. And for that, he'll be known forever and be rich forever. But yes, he definitely is missing some of those elements that that we might want in a leader. Yeah.
Yeah. It changed my opinion a bit as somebody who was a little bit more on the defensive posture towards him when to one being like, oh, you know what? Actually, maybe there are better folks to lead this. I don't know. Okay. Last question. This is on Russia, which I've been sort of teasing. I'm really interested in the various narratives around Putin and Russia. And I've studied it a bit. And I feel like there's a couple camps that have emerged, and I want to get your thoughts on Putin, essentially. You wrote a book, now I'm blanking on the title of the book, but about the oligarchs. Oh, Once Upon a Time in Russia.
Once Upon a Time in Russia, yeah.
And it's about the rise of Putin and what happened with the oligarchs. And I feel like you have folks like David Sachs, who, for anybody who listens to the All In podcast, knows David Sachs rants about Russia all the time and Putin, and sort of seems to think that Putin is a rational actor who is responding to the U.S. letting, basically not refusing to let Ukraine into NATO and saying, NATO might be at Russia's doorstep. And this is the kind of rational response by, albeit a dictator, who feels threatened. And I think you have liberals who feel like it is our moral duty to topple this man or to do anything, to get him out of there. You have the war hawks who want, war because they're hawks and their financial interests. And then there's this voice that I think is really interesting, which is Bill Browder, who I'm sure you know Bill, and are familiar with. Yes. Yeah. And he wrote the book Red Notice, and he's written several books since then that are just incredible about his own story being the largest foreign investor in Russia. And the take I've heard from him is essentially that, Putin has stolen just unfathomable countless amounts of money from the Russian economy and from the Russian people effectively. And that this war is a way to distract from what is ultimately going to be kind of economic catastrophe in Russia, and to kind of distract the people from rising up against Putin by creating an enemy, kind of, I guess it's a wag the dog or whatever the phrase is there. What is your take, having deeply researched and studied all of this? Yeah.
So I spent a lot of time researching Putin and all the oligarchs who put Putin into power. And Bill is absolutely right that Putin has amassed $200 billion or more. He's the largest oligarch of them all. And all of the oligarchs are essentially his purse strings, his cash register that he calls on to pull money out of. But the thing about Putin that one has to keep in mind is that Putin has always dreamed in this massive Russian empire. He has always said that he believed that the fall of the Soviet Union was the biggest mistake in the last 100 years in history, that Gorbachev ruined the country, and that he really wanted to turn back the clock to the Stalin era. He worshipped Stalin, and he actually, when he first took power, gathered all the oligarchs in Stalin's old house and lined them up and said, "You all made a lot of money, you can keep your money, but from here on out, you stay out of my way." Putin is sort of the ultimate believer in a worldwide Russia. So when you look at what's going on in the Ukraine, it's not surprising that he wanted the Ukraine. He wants all of the former republics to be back in part of Russia. This was the one that he felt he could take. So I do think there's an element of it that is really this nationalistic view that I'm going to take this land. He thought he could do it quickly and simply. He thought Kiev would fall and that the government would run away and that he would have Ukraine in a weekend. Part of that was that his generals lied to him about the strength of their army. Part of that was that the European and American response was to pour so much armament and money into the Ukraine that it was able to stand up to them. But for whatever reason, Putin did not succeed in that overnight grasp of Ukraine. And now he's an incredibly dangerous individual because irrational is kind of the wrong word. This is a guy who believes in a unified Russia, in a massive, powerful Russia, but is also in his 70s and potentially ill. And so his legacy he's looking at, he knows he's never going to just ride off into the sunset with his billions. That's not his legacy. He's either stays in power or he's doomed. So he needs to stay in power. So unless he finds a way to win this war, he's going to fall out of power. And that to him is suicide. So you have a guy who's against a rock and a hard place, basically. He either wins this war in Ukraine in some way or another, or he dies. And so neither of those, is an easy answer. And so you have to find a way. And I hate to say it because what he's doing is awful.
Kind of appease him like a golden parachute exit for him.
You can't, appease. If you appease, then he does it again. You have all these worries. He has to be able to come out of there with enough of his, self intact to not make it worthwhile to drop nuclear weapons.
You need to give him a way to claim victory.
Exactly. There has to be an off-ramp. If there's no off-ramp for Putin, then this is big trouble for everybody.
Do you feel like it feels like, and I'm like, we're not doing that?
No, we're definitely not.
We're taking the off ramps off the table.
Because what we see happening is Russia's going to crumble if they keep going down this route. I think there's a lot of people who see what's happening in Russia and saying this is very bad for them. The longer this goes, the worse it is for Russia. And so that's true, but it's scary because
it's terrifying.
Russia collapsing is not always going to be a good thing. There's a lot of nuclear weapons over there. There's a lot of warlords. There's a lot of stuff that's going to happen if Russia collapses. So personally, I would love to see a way for the war to end that doesn't give Putin very much, but enough for him to go home and say, okay, we're done with that. And, slowly he gets older and passes Russia on to somewhere else.
Well, and that's the piece that I feel the most compelled by is like the man is so old, like, give him an off ramp and just wait for him to die. It's not like he's 36 and going to be, a risk for the next 50 years.
Exactly. So who knows how we can get out of this situation. But I do think it's really hard to just say, don't give in to anything and fight to the last man. Because you're talking about millions of people dying in that route. And so I don't know. I mean, I don't have the answer. I'm not sort of a politician or anything like that. But I do think if you read Once Upon a Time in Russia, you get a feeling for the man. People have underestimated Putin over and over and over again. And this man has, from the very beginning, been a very nationalistic believer in the Soviet Union. And so I think that you have to keep that into mind. It's not it's not a game to him. And so for him to have some level of success is going to be important for everybody, which is horrible, but probably true.
Well, Ben, this was such a pleasure. I would love to talk to you for 3 more hours about any number of things that, again, everything you've written about is like sits at the center of what I'm interested in. And I know there's a lot of other people who feel that way, which is why you've had the success you have. So just thank you so much for coming on, for chatting with us. Would love to have you back sometime. And
thank you. I really enjoyed it. I appreciate it. I could go on and on and on about all these things.
And I would love it.
Thank you so much for having me. It was awesome.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of Overpriced JPEGs. If you liked this conversation, if you liked this episode, please go ahead and hit subscribe. It helps me out, it helps the show out, and it means you will get alerts and updates when we post new content. Thanks again.